2024, a defining year in Singapore's history. As we reflect on the year's most significant events, one constant stands out: change. Changes within Singapore, shaping our path ahead, and changes beyond our borders, influencing the wind in our sails. We begin this journey of transformation with one of the year's most defining events, the country's new leader.
I, Lawrence Wong, having been appointed to the office of Prime Minister,
15th May 2024, a new chapter in Singapore's history began when Lawrence Wong was sworn in as the nation's fourth Prime Minister. The search for a successor to former Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong was not without its challenges. Once in line to take over the reins of leadership, Deputy Prime Minister Heng Swee Keat stepped aside in 2021 to allow someone younger to lead the 4G team.
Once Mr. Wong was selected by his peers to be their leader, things have generally gone according to plan. It's been very smooth, and I think that is in many ways keeping with leadership transition and handovers in Singapore. So in that sense, markets were not at all affected. The wheels of government, continued without any disruption.
In his first 7 months, the Prime Minister has navigated a demanding agenda. He has made his debut at major summits and also embarked on introductory visits to Singapore's ASEAN neighbours.
He's emphasizing a lot about what is happening within the region. So the broader geopolitical landscape that may occur elsewhere will definitely have impact on Singapore. But I think what Singapore would want to emphasize, maybe at least within the short term, is to make sure that we maintain our good relationship with our neighbours and see what working cooperation partnership that we can forge in the next few years of his prime ministership.
Closer to home, Mr. Wong has also been doing his rounds at various constituencies across Singapore to meet and engage with Singaporeans directly. Mr. Wong has also pledged to hold regular press conferences to communicate the government's thinking and considerations to the public.
I think very often people look at policy consultation as the government consulting, after the basic blueprint, has been drawn up. I think there is a recognition by Mr. Wong and his peers that they need to go further upstream in terms of the consultation, right? So in a way, have a blank canvas, let people offer their views, offer their suggestions as to how policies could be redesigned or new policies could be drawn up. And I think that gives people a greater sense of ownership.
In his first National Day rally speech, Mr. Wong unveiled several policy changes, describing them as part of a major reset. Key announcements included a revamp of the gifted education program and extended shared parental leave. However, political analysts have largely observed continuity in his policies during his initial months in office.
The fundamental tenets of the idea that the government is working very hard to try to distribute the fruits of economic growth to all Singaporeans is still there. So that fundamental principle is still there. But what Mr. Lawrence Wong may be seeking to do is to tweak some policies to make sure that whatever the government does is much more redistributive and is much more targeted towards the correct people that need the help, that to improve their lives, to help them progress in life.
Mr. Wong has urged a significant shift in Singaporeans' mindsets as the nation pursues a renewed Singapore dream, one where individuals can thrive and flourish on their own terms, embracing less conventional paths in areas like arts and sports.
A wave of change as Singapore swore in a new leader. And just a few months later, there were even more waves, this time in the waters of Marseille, as Max Mader, the boy wonder, sailed to a historic Olympic bronze. Yip Pin Siu and Geraldine Tan added to the country's triumph, bringing home 2 golds and a silver from the Paralympics. We take you through this historic year of champions who pushed their limits to achieve greatness like never before.
How does it feel?
Heavy. No, it's
it's a momentous occasion, of course, and I must say that yeah, it's official now. Here is your present to Singapore in person, and I hope that everyone enjoyed the show. I feel simply overwhelmed.
Under the sweltering summer heat by the Mediterranean, 17-year-old Max Mader arrived. He became the first Singaporean to bring home an Olympic medal since swimmer Joseph Schooling in 2016, and the youngest ever to do so. At that Paris Games, Mader was among 23 athletes who flew the country's flag high, alongside Spring Queen Shanti Pereira, swimmer Gan Qinghui, and shuttler Yeo Tia Min. Many, like Yeo, are right back in training and competing ahead of a busy year.
Something that I learned as I continue to give my best, there are always opportunities out there, and it's always for the people that's ready to grab it, right? So I feel that, after this experience, I really want to learn how to better prepare myself in all areas so that when opportunities come next year, I can be ready to grab it. And being an athlete, the responsibilities and my goals, it just fueled my drive and motivation for the next Olympics.
Later at the Paralympics, swimmer Yip Bin Siu achieved a three-peat by winning gold once more in the 100-meter backstroke S2 event, adding to earlier wins in Rio de Janeiro and Tokyo. She also successfully defended her crown in the 50-meter backstroke S2.
Next year, Singapore will be hosting the World Para Swimming Championships. It will be in Asia for the very first time. So I think that is my next big goal, to be racing on home ground in such a major competition in September. It won't be an easy year. I'm already back training, and I'll start competing and traveling again come February. So it's going to be a really hectic year.
More success came in boccia, when teammate Geraldine Tan dug deep to pick up the nation's very first Paralympic medal in the sport.
This year, great. Busy for this whole year.
I feel that we have exceeded the goals. I set the goals, realistic goals actually, being the first time. I mean, it is a bonus to walk to the podium. The biggest lesson to learn is how to be a true champion, to adapt to different challenges, to different environment.
On the back of that success, the Culture, Community and Youth Ministry announced a slew of plans to build on that momentum. It includes a new Home of Team Singapore with enhanced training and sports science facilities for national athletes. Supporting schemes such as scholarships and grants will also be expanded. What fans can look forward to as well are more international sporting events arriving on these shores.
It was a time of festivities and friendships. Over 300,000 tickets were sold for one of Singapore's largest concerts, with nearly a third of attendees coming from around the world. This contributed to the roughly 13.9 million international visitors in 2024, nearly a quarter of on-year growth. Other live performances include British artist Ed Sheeran, who staged his largest show in Asia with 60,000 people. It is part of a strategy by the government to create events appealing to diverse interests and audiences, with plans to hold more of such events in the year to come.
Beyond economic impacts, live entertainment acts as well as mega acts actually bring a global brand value to Singapore, as well as keep Singapore as a top destination among the mindshares of our visitors. Beyond direct economic impact, we also see a lot of spillover impacts into other adjacent industries such as hotels, retail, as well as dining.
Ms. Lu adds that security and high-quality infrastructure help in making Singapore appealing for large shows and events, including the annual Formula One night race that brings local and global acts together. One global logistics organization supporting one of the F1 teams says that Singapore's global trade connections and customs procedure make the island ideal for wheeling and dealing.
F1 in Singapore is another level. I think it's a great event, and the way that the event is activated in the country itself, and also the global and international approach that Singapore has to the event is really second to none. You see Formula One in every part of the city during the race. So all the businesses, be it small size or big, medium size or even larger enterprises, they embrace the fact that it's Formula One way. You don't find it in other parts of the world.
And one cannot forget the very place that housed many of this year's performances. The Singapore Sports Hub saw a 50% jump in attendees compared to the previous year. This time around, they activated the entire Kallang Alive precinct, offering audiences more than one way to enjoy the festivities.
We ultimately want the hub to be alive and to be always on. And so it's not just about coming to experience an event that's here. It's about coming to enjoy the waterfront, the unique Kallang Basin. If we are going to be the sports and entertainment hub for the nation and potentially serving the region as well, we want to ensure that we have a number of offerings that are unique.
While international sporting events were held at the Sports Hub, local community events like the National School Games had its time in the arena too. It was also a space for communities to reflect and come together.
A glimpse into Singapore's future shaped by the next generation of leaders. But this isn't just about celebrating the triumphs of 2024. It's also about grappling with the nation's most pressing challenges. Join us after the break as we explore an aspect of Singapore that's evolving, both in quantity and quality. Welcome back. To meet the needs of a future society, Singapore has been making changes to suit its evolving demographic, from housing to transport. Here's a look at the infrastructure development changes this year.
Throughout her 13 years living in Bukit Batok, 67-year-old Madam Fu says she's seen several upgrades, most recently to make walking journeys safer and more convenient.
So Auntie, what are some of the changes that you have seen at this junction here?
Oh, now there are 3 traffic lights here. So happy to cross over because usually I join CC activities and beach centre activities, and also good to those people on wheelchair.
Madam Fu tells me she used to be afraid of crossing this junction where cars used to come from all 3 directions. Now it's been designated as a pedestrian-friendly street with features like barrier-free crossings and road markings.
We piloted friendly streets, and to our surprise, when we did the pilots for friendly streets, the communities told us that, hey, these were not just good for seniors, they were actually good for everyone. We intend to roll out friendly streets to all towns by 2030.
It's not just the road infrastructure that's seen changes. Over the past few years, new innovative housing solutions like these community care apartments have also been introduced. Designed with seniors in mind, they offer a supportive living environment for them to age independently while staying connected to the community. Each unit here comes with senior-friendly design features and access to services like 24-hour emergency response. The first 2 projects were launched in Bukit Batok and Queensway, and more are being developed in different locations across Singapore. All these are part of a wider urban planning strategy.
Whenever we do planning, we take a long-term perspective to try to balance the different competing land demands and to meet the changing needs of our population. So while we plan for economic growth and ensure environmental protection, we also prioritize social inclusivity. In that, we actually plan for changing demographics and the evolving lifestyle preferences of our people.
Take, for example, this block of housing flats in Yuhua. These vertical panels are part of a trial by the Public Housing Agency to reduce energy consumption. It's a departure from the usual horizontal solar panels typically installed on the rooftops of HDB blocks.
The roof space are very constrained, it's very limited in terms of the space. Whereas for high-rise buildings, you have space that you can actually install solar panel to harness the solar energy.
With around 1 in 4 Singaporeans aged 65 or above by 2030, these age-friendly, sustainable and resilient infrastructure will place Singapore in good stead for years to come.
One of Singapore's most valuable resources is its coastline, whether it's soaking up the sun on the sandy beaches of Sentosa or exploring the mangroves at Sungai Buloh and Labrador Nature Reserves. This year also exposed the vulnerability of our island nation to external threats when oil spilled into our waters following a bunkering accident. Now, Singapore knows all too well that a clean coastline doesn't come without effort. Here's how the nation is working to protect its shores and keep them pristine.
On 14th June, an collision between two vessels released some 400 metric tons of oil. Hours later, Singapore's southern coastline turned black. And a massive cleaning operation began.
We were very lucky that this oil spill happened during neap tide, where it was not spring low tide, and therefore the oil didn't reach coral reef areas and seagrass areas for most parts. But if the cleanup activity had not been as fast, the oil could be remobilized and actually impact these lower tide ecosystems, which we know are sensitive and yet also very important and supports high diversity.
The oil spill may have been a one-off crisis, but a larger looming problem threatens our coastlines: climate change. Picture rising sea levels flooding places we live, work and play. It's why some researchers are on the hunt for solutions to help fend the low-lying city-states from future storm surges. It's a tall order. Take this stackable wall being developed at the Coastal Protection and Flood Resilience Institute of Singapore. It has to be easy to retrofit, completely watertight, and blend in with the natural environment.
Our plan is to continue to do more detailed survey of every vulnerable section of the existing coastline, and hopefully we will conduct a lot of laboratory model scale study. We love to have a pilot test plot in some part of Singapore coastline and test it out, this whole concept, to validate its practicality, its economy, and its fast and suitable for our current environment.
The path towards secure coastlines stretches endlessly ahead. And with innovative solutions supported by policy, a resilient future for Singapore gleams on the horizon.
Authorities in Singapore are shifting to a different gear to control congestion even with more vehicles allowed on the roads. One option is to charge car owners by how far they've driven. Traffic management systems could also help. This one, by ST Engineering, can predict congestion up to an hour before it happens. It can even automatically alert police and ambulance services or push notifications to drivers on displays in and outside of the car.
Singapore road networks are very interconnected. Any accidents or disruption to traffic flow can impact our commute time very greatly. So we have implemented variations of such system in cities worldwide, such as Singapore and Dubai. We are able to help traffic authorities to reduce congestion duration by 50% and reduce overall travel time of motorists by 20%.
Singapore is also reinforcing public transport to reduce the need for people to use cars, even if they own them. Billions are being spent on planned upgrades to improve connectivity and accessibility. This year, a 6-day train disruption on a major line also took place after tracks were severely damaged. Experts say such incidents could lead to unexpected spending on maintenance or replacement schedules. As costs rise, a balance will have to be struck.
Commuters need to be aware that as things change, right, sometimes their mode of transportation or the way they connect themselves may have to change. Let's say, for example, the number of residents in point A reduces, certain bus services may also be adjusted. then instead of a straight bus, you may have to either walk to the nearest MRT station, or you may have to connect in a different kind of way.
We're taking public transport in, let's say the UK or some US cities. The per ride fares are actually a lot higher than the fares you would pay if you buy some kind of concession pass or travel pass, right? And in Singapore, there's less differentiation. What it actually means is you're giving away a lot more subsidies for tourists and occasional users. So I think looking at fare differentiation a bit more is another avenue, possibly, for trying to distribute the cost of public transport a bit more efficiently or a bit more equitably.
Associate Prof. Tessera says it will become increasingly important to engage the public in such conversations to try to make sense of such costs and who will pay for them.
Next, we zoom out to the bigger picture, exploring the strategic ties forged by Singapore's leaders and the drivers of the economy. We'll also take a look at what kept the courts busy this year, from the first Singaporean minister facing graft charges to the largest money laundering case in the nation's history. Welcome back. Continuing our saga of change, we turn our focus to Singapore's role on the global stage. The high-level diplomatic events hosted by the nation marked a defining year. As Singapore welcomed international leaders, it also broke new ground in trade, climate action and technology. Let's take a closer look at the moments when Singapore opened its doors to the world.
From princes to prime ministers, patrons of peace to presidents at war. 2024 saw Singapore at the crossroads of diplomacy.
Prime Minister Lawrence Wong has pledged to bring relations with Malaysia
to cement old friendships and build new ties.
6 agreements were signed.
Each high-level visit comes with unique requirements. Behind the scenes, it starts with understanding protocol.
Protocol basically acts like a bridge between many of our agencies. Our key role is to ensure that the overall visit is smooth.
This involves facilitating foreign visits, a complex effort that needs collaboration across multiple ministries and agencies. At the core of it all, ironclad security with meticulous planning on who and what to protect.
It boils down to ensuring that the right people get cleared, communicating these restrictions to the foreign side to ensure that on the ground there is no miscommunication. Some of the places that the visiting dignitaries visit are restricted areas such as Istana, Parliament House. Security measures at these places are very tight, as you can imagine.
Singapore has long relied on diplomacy to connect with the world, adapting to changing global dynamics, supporting trade, strengthening regional security, and building trust and influence through its soft power. In fact, 2024 saw at least 13 such visits to the nation, with VVIPs arriving from all 4 corners of the globe. Here's a look at how the year's diplomatic calendar unfolded.
The year kicked off with a red carpet welcome for the Crown Prince of Jordan. Another royal visit followed by Sultan Ibrahim, King of Malaysia. Away from the pomp and pageantry, a symbolic train ride. In 2024, there were high-level visits almost every month. Rounding off the year, the arrival of the King of Sweden.
Heads of state visit Singapore's leaders for all sorts of reasons, whether it's to tackle global issues that affect the planet or to rally support for urgent crises closer to home.
One such mission came with the visit of President Volodymyr Zelensky. Also visiting was a long-time strategic partner, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi. But Singapore's soft power is also about more than just business.
There is also an attempt to sort of showcase to these leaders more about Singapore beyond just going to Istana for meeting with the head of states, to bring them to certain places of interest, which also reflects, I guess, Singapore's attempt to narrate to the world our multicultural, multi-religious sort of social fabric which I think is a very important aspect of how Singapore views its place in the world.
Pope Francis' 2024 visit highlighted the nation's strong social fabric.
Il rispetto reciproco, la collaborazione, il dialogo e la libertà di professare il proprio credo nella lealtà alla legge comune sono condizioni determinanti del successo e della stabilità ottenuti da Singapore.
Like diplomacy, they are the intangibles, the glue that makes Singapore tick.
It might not make it to those down-to-earth conversations, but it's still the meaningful moments, the handshakes, the candid exchanges, and shared hopes, where all that trust and understanding are built. Just as the skyline of Singapore rests on invisible pillars, Singapore's diplomacy thrives on these connections that in 2024 brought the world closer to our shores.
Resuming this tale of change, we move our attention to Singapore's international trade, a sector which has seen more players double down on technology to be more efficient and to brace for shocks. But with ongoing trade wars and armed conflicts, shipping prices could go up, leaving those at home to bear the costs.
When attacks at the Red Sea intensified earlier this year, ships were forced to reroute, resulting in delays. At Singapore's ports, the congestion piled up. In May, vessels that used to take less than a day to dock were waiting up to a week.
In the last couple of months, the freight rates for shipping has actually gone down from the high 2 or 3 months ago. I think for 2025, it's probably a continuation of what we have to prepare for in the last couple of years, and that is around geopolitical tensions, changes in how we diversify our supply chain, how we prepare for technology impact.
That's why operator PSA is gearing up for the year ahead. These automated vehicles at Tuas Port will be getting a 5G upgrade so they can track the movement of cargo from berth to ships in real time. But a Trump presidency next year is casting doubt on global supply chain resilience, especially as the incoming administration has hinted at hiking tariffs.
When there's expectation of higher tariffs, the companies will stockpile. So in the short term, that may actually cause a spike in imports, and therefore potentially shipping rates will go up.
Local manufacturers that import raw materials or have overseas production may be hit the most. For instance, small and medium enterprises in the semiconductor space faced disruption.
SME sectors here are a big part of the supply chain of the semiconductor manufacturing. And when the projects are delayed, basically they have no business for that period. With a dry season of no business for 3-6 months, it can impact these SMEs very severely.
To get better oversight of their supply chain, some are turning to firms like Epicor. Their software can predict demand and track products and shipment so that companies can adjust their inventory accordingly.
We see a lot more positivity in the business trends or business for our customers, maybe in the second half. So I think it's all going towards growth. Also looking at the end of this year and next year, I think growth is expected, and that's bringing a lot of positivity to the business.
Industry watchers say that with the growing demand for electric vehicles, this could signal the need for greater diversification of supply chains. And that will mean tapping further on Singapore's ports to trade reliably along one of the world's most important waterways.
American superstar Taylor Swift's 6-night sold-out concert in Singapore fulfilled not just the wildest dreams of fans, but also some local businesses. But that love story quickly ended. The F&B sector shrank in the next 2 consecutive quarters due to declines in the sales volumes of restaurants, fast food outlets, and cafes. Amid rising costs and manpower constraints, the Black Hole Group was forced to close 2 outlets.
We consolidated and we studied the brands that were doing well and not so well. Even the ones that are not so well, we decided to put it on hold, end the chapter, and redeploy our resources to where we felt would bring us more returns.
For next year, the Trade and Industry Ministry expects the retail and F&B industries to continue declining, with more Singaporeans travelling overseas. Instead, growth is expected to come from manufacturing and trade-related services sectors.
Some of the sectors that could continue to see positive performance will be the modern services sectors. I think this could include the finance and insurance sector, the business services sector, as well as the information and communications sector.
Still, local firms aren't giving up without a fight. For this event operator, it's tapping on breakout activities that happen during big events.
A good example will be the Formula One, because that will allow us now to reach out to sponsors to say, hey, do you want to do an activation around F1? Big MICE events that have been here year on year. That really allows everybody to play a part, to rally around the event and create micro events around it.
He adds that besides waiting for anchor events to count on year after year, more could be done to develop homegrown events into international ones. With Singapore's economy expected to soften slightly in 2025, these efforts could just be what's needed to jolt international visitor arrivals and tourism spending.
Singapore's economy wasn't the only thing bustling this year. The courts were equally busy, with several high-profile cases making headlines. From the conviction of a former transport minister to the trial of the leader of the opposition and the sentencing of the last of 10 offenders involved in a $3 billion money laundering probe, it's been a year of significant courtroom drama. Here's a look back at how it all unfolded.
It's a scene few in Singapore could have imagined. A former government minister arriving at court to face corruption and other criminal charges. The media frenzy outside an indication of the intense public interest in the trial of former Transport Minister S. Iswaran. The 62-year-old was charged with 35 counts of corruption, obstructing justice, and obtaining valuable items as a public servant, charges he pleaded not guilty to. The prosecution sought to have the case heard in the High Court, citing strong public interest considerations. Contrary to expectations of a lengthy trial, Iswaran changed his plea to guilty within an hour after the prosecution amended 2 corruption charges to lesser offences and proceeded with only 5 charges. He chose not to appeal against his sentence and is now serving a 12-month jail term. Meanwhile, property tycoon Ong Beng Sing, accused of giving Iswaran gifts, is facing 2 charges. Iswaran wasn't the only political figure to appear before the courts this year. Leader of the opposition, Pritam Singh, was also involved in a high-profile criminal trial, one that delivered surprising revelations about what happened after former Workers' Party MP Raisa Khan told a false anecdote in Parliament. Singh is accused of lying to the Committee of Privileges about what happened after Ms. Khan told the lie. Pritam Singh, the Workers' Party leader, was charged in March with 2 counts of making false statements. He also applied to have his case heard in the High Court, but his request was rejected. Over a 3-week trial, more lies were uncovered, including those told by Ms. Khan and 2 other former WP members. The public was particularly interested in hearing from former WP chief Lau Tia Kiang, who questioned why it took so long for party leaders to reveal Ms. Khan's lie. Despite this, Mr. Lau expressed unwavering support for his successor.
I think Singaporeans today are mature. The voters are mature. We are now a mature democracy. The voters can make distinction between who is good politician and who is not a good politician. And I believe Pritam Singh is a good politician. He's capable, competent leader with a heart for Singapore and Singaporeans.
Both sides have presented their cases and now await the judge's verdict due in mid-February. Another case that dominated the headlines this year was the trial of 10 foreign nationals involved in Singapore's largest ever money laundering investigation, valued at $3 billion. The suspects were arrested in August 2023, following a nationwide operation 2 years in the making. All 10 individuals were convicted and sentenced to prison terms ranging from 13 to 17 months. After serving their time behind bars, they were deported. Among the 17 others who fled Singapore, 15 have agreed to surrender assets worth approximately $1.85 billion to the state, and they have been barred from returning. Investigations into the remaining 2 are ongoing.
The high-profile cases that dominated the courts in 2024 were more than just about the law taking its course. They also reiterated the importance of ensuring a clean reputation of governance in Singapore. And coming up after the break, we take a look at other key areas the nation is striving to excel in. Welcome back. We now turn our attention to some of the significant healthcare crises that emerged this year. Among them, the tuberculosis outbreak at Jalan Bukit Merah and the arrival of Mpox Clade 2 on our shores. Next up, we explore how the healthcare system has not only responded to these challenges, but also evolved to become more adaptable and resilient in tackling such incidents.
Empty airports and quiet markets. It was as if life came to a standstill during the height of the COVID-19 outbreak in 2020. But today, the pandemic has seemingly faded into the background as crowds and gatherings return in full swing. Still, it's difficult to predict how future outbreaks will transmit and spread, and so staying ready is key.
If we look at, for example, experience in COVID-19, and also our earlier experience in the original SARS coronavirus 1 in 2003. Both of them are coronaviruses, but their spread, their presentation, and the response measures are vastly different. Therefore, it is important for us to have a preparedness response system that is flexible and nimble enough to deal with a future disease X. X referring to a future known or unknown disease that can present in whichever different way.
Prof. Lee says one key takeaway from COVID is the need to coordinate across different systems within the government and society at large. This came into play earlier in the year when a cluster of tuberculosis cases were uncovered at Jalan Bukit Merah.
This open-air car park may be empty now, but this was a site where over 2,500 people were screened for tuberculosis. A temporary tent was set up here in January after 10 cases of TB was detected in the Jalan Bukit Merah area. And this effort to isolate and detect these infectious diseases quickly is a key part of Singapore's pandemic strategy.
Authorities also use systems developed during COVID, such as registration platforms, to deliver test results and follow-up notices to residents. They also learned that consistent and swift communication was key to ease concerns in the event of a disease outbreak and to prevent misinformation from taking root.
To do this, we actually went on a door-to-door exercise, something we also did during COVID, to really communicate all about TB and what they need to do to every single resident. And we also work with the grassroots organizations to reach out to residents who, for example, were not at home and were not easy for us to reach out to.
The COVID-19 pandemic also showed the government the need to strengthen healthcare capacity. Mr. Lee adds that MOH is working to ensure that the healthcare system can meet demands during peacetime, but adapt to respond to pandemic outbreaks if needed. That includes keeping isolation and quarantine facilities warm and strengthening Singapore's supply chain resilience for critical goods like vaccines. Ensuring that healthcare workers are well prepared for the future is also crucial.
We need good systems to share frontline information when cases surge in an outbreak. We need resources to care for patients, testing, treating, admitting patients, making sure we get them home safely. And NCID is working to refresh these workflows in advance of the next outbreak.
So while memories of social distancing may be a thing of the past, lessons learned have burned themselves into the hearts and minds of Singaporeans. Authorities reassure that systems are in place so that when the next pandemic comes, Singapore will be able to adapt and save the lives and livelihoods of its people.
On border control, all travellers coming into Singapore by land or sea must submit a health declaration through an online arrival card service. This is a step down from the height of COVID, when all travellers coming into Singapore had to show proof of a negative pre-departure COVID test. And while you don't have to mask up on the public transport or in indoor healthcare facilities since February last year, it's still a requirement for higher risk medical settings such as emergency departments. The Health Ministry says this is to improve general infection control practices and ensure that medically vulnerable persons and seniors are well protected. Singapore has continued to roll out updated COVID-19 vaccines even as it closes down joint testing and vaccination centres across the island. COVID-19 jabs remain free under the National Vaccination Programme and available at nearly 500 GPs and 10 polyclinics.
There were changes not just in healthcare but across other sectors too. The Education Ministry rolled out new policies aimed at shifting the focus away from an overemphasis on grades and towards fostering holistic development. The Gifted Education Programme was revamped for greater flexibility, letting students pursue their strengths and interests. But the question remains, will these changes ease student pressure in the long run and help them unlock their potential?
Eva and Elizabeth love doing things together. The Primary 5 twin girls even both tried to enter the Gifted Education Programme, but with different outcomes. With only 9 schools offering the program back then, Eva had to switch schools somewhat reluctantly.
When I got into GP, I had to change schools to Raffles, and then I had to leave Elizabeth behind. Not only could we not go for recess together, but then we also couldn't go to school together.
But a new chapter awaits. Students like Elizabeth would also be able to try again and focus on her love for the English language.
At first, we thought we only had one chance to make it. It's you make it or you don't. But then now you can go in even if you're primary 5 or primary 6 when you're ready.
I think a holistic system which removes pressure from the kids, or at least try to alleviate some of the pressures, it would be really helpful in their long-term development.
Other parents say while this is a shift in the right direction, the practical-driven nature of the program should also be expanded to all students. Alas, labels may also inadvertently cause more stress.
What I'm not in favor of actually is when we start to segregate our kids a little bit more, so we say, okay, one kid is more high achieving, one kid is more low achieving, if you will, or less academically gifted. It's used a bit too loosely, and I think it puts a lot of unnecessary expectations on the kid. And a lot of unnecessary expectations on the family as well.
The Education Ministry wants students to enjoy learning and be less fixated with examinations and grades. For example, by also allowing all secondary students to take subjects at different levels and supporting ITE graduates to upskill to a diploma earlier. Budding art talents also have something to look forward to. But the question remains if mindsets can shift so quickly.
A recurring concern is, of course, to what extent these policy initiatives will be able to curb the rise of a hyper-competitive school system. And that's something that's very real, of course, for many parents and students.
Teachers' welfare has also not been forgotten. They will not need to respond to work-related messages outside of school hours, and non-teaching duties will also be streamlined to reduce workloads.
An education system that's been known for its success in subjects like mathematics and science, and now for creative thinking too. The Programme for International Students Assessment, or PISA, results released earlier this year were something unexpected. Around 60% of Singaporean students were top performers in the field, more than twice the average of 27% in other countries. Less well-off students also fared better against their overseas peers, scoring above the average of 33 points. Educators say the results indicate that students here can think creatively to thrive in the future, and this applies even in a wide range of fields.
Creative skills have definitely been propagated in various forms, and not only in the visual arts, which is my domain, but in literacy, in the sciences and STEM. There's definitely been a focus at looking at things like divergent thinking, critical thinking, and all these things which are contributing to an output that is, inverted commas, what is known as creative.
And with technology evolving rapidly, that quality will be important in the workplace too, in terms of innovation and adaptability.
Now you actually need to be creative even more than any other thing and any other time, because the ability to create value, to be able to, look at things and say, okay, we've got this much of information, garnered perhaps from generative AI, but here's what we're going to do with it, and here's how we're going to tackle this problem.
But with the study also finding that less than half of Singaporean students believed in their abilities, the educators highlighted the need to build confidence.
Despite our students' strong performance in the creative thinking task, they did not perceive themselves as creative.
The Education Ministry will continue to support teachers in improving their education approach to foster students' creativity and boost their confidence.
And with that, the 2024 season comes to an end. From GDP growth to government policies, concerts to coastal protection, this year has been a reminder to stay prepared for anything. Looking ahead to whatever is on the horizon, there may be challenges to navigate, but there will also be the opportunities into the next year and beyond. I'm Shalin Sia, and this has been the Year in Review.